Welcome to Conscious Eye, living in authentic connection and harmony with self, others, and the world, featuring Ravi and Savitri.
Oh, yeah.
Good morning, Ravi.
Good morning, Savitri. How are you?
I am fine. Thank you very much for asking. And I'm so grateful to have the temperatures in a comfortable zone. I woke up this morning, and I'm just going to say this, a lot of people will probably not agree with me, but it was 52 in my house and it just felt wonderful.
I would probably be one of those people, but I am enjoying the cooler weather for what it is. I always like the transition of seasons. It
Mhm.
always, every time I roll around, it feels like the first time. It's like, oh, this feels different. How do I dress for this? I always forget how do I put things together? And so it's a transition. But yeah, I took Darcy out for her walk today and it was just lovely. And having the sunshine through my south windows is lovely as well. And as we were sitting here preparing, I was talking about how lovely it has been to the universe has gifted me a lot of opportunities through what were certainly looking like mishaps. But I was like, hey, I'll take it. uh, and use time that was given to me to do some dharmic work in the past week or so. And it just feels so good and it feels so aligned. And it's that ease that we've talked about. And it's like, yes, thank you. More, please.
Hmm.
So just waiting for um well, not really waiting for anything, continuing to do the work and just allowing what comes in to come in and taking that opportunity to say, oh, hey, this is an opportunity that I could use to see this instead of that, go this way instead of that way, instead of being upset and angry that this isn't working, use that time for another purpose. And that's what I've been doing. And it's been really fun.
Yes, and you mentioned before we got started this morning about the recording times that we've chosen, which we'll let everyone
Mm.
know is a Saturday morning.
Mhm.
And everyone knows what their Saturday morning ambience is like. And when we decided to do that, it seemed like the most available time that we both had in our schedule. So we chose it. And I'm feeling the ambience of it starting to really vibrate. What's happening with you on a Saturday morning when we get together for this?
Well, I have to first, not to sidestep that question, but I first have to say Saturn Day has
Right.
taken on a new meaning for me, kind of a special meaning as I go through a Saturn return, as everyone does, and many people may be going through their own Saturn returns right now. But it's definitely a day for reflection,
Hmm.
a day for moving a little slower. Saturn slows things down
Hmm.
and just a day of observation for us. So Darcy and I start our morning. My cat loves to go on walks, and we have our own little micro ecosystem here in our little community. And walking a cat is different than walking a dog. We certainly take time to inspect the little microcosm that we live in.
Hmm.
And just being able to observe all the little pockets of nature. In fact, oh, and it's gone now, but all this morning while I was just preparing, I like to have time to sit with my energy, maybe do a card pull.
Hmm.
Um, and I didn't actually do a card pull this morning because my sign was right outside my window. I had the most beautiful big dragonfly hanging out on my window
Oh,
screen this morning. And of
lovely.
course, Nothing has meaning until you assign it, and there are many different meanings for dragonflies, but several. It's spiritual connection and good fortune. So that was what I took as my sign for the day. But it's really about, for me, slowing down, observing, allowing, noticing,
Hmm.
and yeah, leaning back. We talk a lot about leaning in. For
Right.
me, it's about leaning back a little bit. We
And
lean
that
in all
really
week.
and that really helps with the observation too.
Mm.
Where you can lean back and become a little detached. You add some
Hmm.
distance between you and whatever it is there. And
Whatever the week. Yeah, we're
mhm,
told to lean in all the time.
that's
And
right.
we're leaning in and leaning in. And leaning in is great. Sometimes we lean in to hear the quieter things, but sometimes just kind of taking that step back and leaning back allows us to observe as well and see things differently.
Hmm. Yeah. So, you know, I think we both have just been sharing a little bit of a sattvic life.
Mm.
And today, our topic is bringing those four aims, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, into a way of being. And the gunas based on lots of different perspectives. So we'll probably touch on a couple of them and dive in. But the gunas are about how we do that. What is our way? Are we doing what we just described? Being able to come into the present moment, appreciate, even if it's not the most comfortable thing, or if it's a trauma, be able to sit back and observe and recognize the qualities. Gunas are the qualities of life and how they express themselves to us in a reflection from us. So we're back to that mirror quality, is that we know that when we have a couple people in the same space and they experience the same event, and then, a lot of times in some of my presentations and workshops, I would use that as an icebreaker. That's not something new. It's something that's been used a long, long time. And we get everyone's perspective and perception on what that event was. And that really brings into being a sattvic versus a rajasic versus a tamasic way of being. The three gunas.
Mhm.
And yeah.
Well, the gunas are, maybe this is an unfamiliar word for
Hmm.
some listeners, and maybe it's more familiar than with for others, but these are the main qualities, the conditions, the three conditions of matter.
Yes.
So all matter is made of sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic qualities, with the sattvic being more of the pure essence, if we think of more of the ether um, element. Rajasic is creative and initiating energy, and tamasic is inertia and decay. And just like with all things in life, there's different plays and variations and combinations, and all they're fluctuating in a myriad of combinations and how they express themselves, which I think points to what you just said, is how we all respond differently depending on how these combinations of conditions of matter are expressing through us at any given time, if I heard that correctly.
Yes. And the interesting thing about that is that you said all matter, and that includes the planets and all the cosmic energies and the earth-based energies, which are cosmic, and but we just see
Mhm.
them differently, maybe because we're embedded in them. And there are lots of ways to look at that. And one way to look at it is that your birth chart gives you some indications about what is that innate quality that you're bringing. Where are we starting? Where is our point of focus, the planetary light that's shining on us? What has it provided to us for a karmic lesson or two or more, perhaps, in our life? And growth toward a more spiritual way of being. And there are a couple other ways that the word has been defined. One is that it's a string, a string.
Mhm.
And I think of it sometimes as, what are we stringing? Are we stringing those tamasic things that are kind of slowed down and lethargic? And we have some more negative terms we may put to that, destructive or lazy. But sometimes tamasic is a great restorative way of being. So it
Mhm.
has a purpose as we continue on our dharmic path. And then rajasic, that's our interaction with our environment and actually with our mind as well. We don't think of it often that way, but it is. And so we have that kind of social, we call it a social way of being. And it's where we create harmony or discord in the energies of our life. And then the sattvic way, where we are moving into ourself and utilizing the qualities of the self, which we're going to get to in another episode, spend some time on the self. And
Mhm.
so that string, you can string whatever you want on there based on your choices along the way. And you've already come with some things strung on there that you may want to
Mhm.
adjust and accentuate or minimize depending on what your growth pattern, your dharmic path is for this lifetime. It's also what you said, a virtue, a merit, a quality. And it can also be a tendency. So when we think about it, we can say, well, I'll admit to this, I have a tendency to procrastinate. What I have tried to do is add some sattvic qualities into that. And I know that sounds a little odd, but as I procrastinate, I have learned to combine and condense, kind of congeal my energies around it. So I'm not really always procrastinating. Maybe I haven't written one word on a page or put anything on the canvas, right? But my mind is providing that sattvic quality of
Mhm.
still processing, creating, fine tuning, and discerning so that even though I may procrastinate by the human time frame, I can sit down and suddenly it just all flows out. So,
Exactly.
yeah, so be,
That's a
mm-hmm,
Well, that's how we it just makes me think of, metaphysics, or, how we condense time.
mm-hmm,
It
mm-hmm,
rather than being busy all the time and chasing the hustle and the grind, it is being able to sit back and relax sometimes in the body and allow the mind to be working in another way. And we can focus that energy and condense it to almost a point where we can make miracles happen with, all of a sudden, if you can get to that point where it just comes out and flow, like you said, and
mm-hmm,
that there are both sides of the spectrum. Both all of these qualities can have positive and negative aspects or effects
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
depending on how they're used. So it's all about that balancing, if you like to think of it as a spectrum with two, opposite ends, and you're coming somewhere in the middle, or if you think of it as a frequency of, what are you harmonizing with? How are these in harmonization? Is that a word? I like to make up
We can
words
make
on
that
these
up for the day. I
podcasts.
love that word. Anything
Okay.
around harmony works for me.
Don't at me. We'll just, if you know the right word, you just replace it with that one in your head.
Right.
Okay.
And so when we talk about that, I think that's where we would want our ideal to be, when you talk about harmonizing and bringing that into a state of lightness, purity, where it has a flow. Athletes and runners talk about being in the zone, artists, musicians, and actually anyone that's doing something that is of a quality of intense focus where you are feeling comfortable, even more than that, content, even more than that, joyful. It brings you into the zone.
Mhm.
And that sattvic way of living is in the zone. Yeah.
It reminds me of Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote of if you are going to sweep the streets like Michelangelo painted. That's grossly summarized. But
Right.
um,
Mhm.
it's that state, it's that Buddhist quality of when you do the dishes, just be there, do the dishes. You can make that a meditative state,
Mhm.
bringing sattvic quality into your daily life by stirring the pot, right? When you're stirring the pot at dinner, I think we talked about this a while ago, but just stir the pot. And other times it might be more appropriate for your mind to have a more rajasic quality, be more active, be more initiating. Um, there are those times where that's more appropriate. So it is not that there's good or bad, where there's no judgment in these qualities. It's just the interplay of them. Are they benefiting you to your highest potential and good? Are we able to balance and work with these energies in a way that assist us in how we do things? Or are we not aware of how they're impacting us and maybe taking on more of the um, and when I say negative qualities, I mean the ones that just lead to outcomes that maybe are not preferred. Not that they're bad, just not preferred outcomes. And depending on how these are arranged and interplaying and intertwining in our lives, or how you're stringing the thread, as you mentioned.
Yeah. And mentioning Rajasic, which you just did, is that interaction, that vibrancy. And sometimes it can be really self centered and ego driven. And we talked about that last episode. So maybe this helps everyone start to connect how Dharma and the four aims, the ego, and now we're at the gunas, all are ways to provide understanding and knowing about our lives, which will ultimately improve our discernment and help us on our dharmic path. So there are different ways to go about it, and today I think we're about the waves. And the Rajasic way, or the Rajasic guna, that thread, that quality, really is that tipping point for the ego, where I think a lot of the ego understanding of its teamwork with the mind and the soul and the body, its place, its role there, is available. So we spend some time and in practices, and we'll get back to talking about that again because you and I, that's our foundation way of being. I think I'll not speak for you, but I think we probably agree on that.
Mhm.
And when we are in practice, we are working through the Rajasic elements of ourself, the Rajasic qualities of ourselves, and coming into a centered way of being and opening up to the self. When we get out, where we have interactions with the environment, and it can be an activity of any kind, like you mentioned, stirring the pot, gardening, all of that is part of the Rajasic way.
Mhm.
And so then the ego comes alive. And if we happen to be in an environment where it's rather competitive, the ego steps in and and sometimes takes charge. So this is where our learning and our knowing comes into being so that we can adjust those responses that we have, our emotional responses to the environment. All of that lives in the qualities of the Rajasic world and the Rajasic qualities. Yeah.
It does. And you mentioned what you just mentioned made me think of this idea that the Rajasic, if the Rajasic energy is the crown over territory, right? It's
Mhm.
our a desire to gain jurisdiction of what we feel, not just of things, but what we feel, the way we perceive things. We want to dominate, as in a sense.
Mhm.
And whereas as the Sattvic way is the crown of your own universe, your own integrity. You own yourself, and that makes you sovereign, unownable by others, whether that's in mind, body, or spirit. Um, and the tamasic is coming from a place of need and instinct, maybe more than intuition. So if we think of sometimes when we're stuck in that very heavy, confused state, I think of there's a lot of judgment about when folks are going through really hard times about the decisions they may make. And I work, when working with people going through trauma, you have that tunnel vision because you're just really acting out of instinct and trying to meet your next need. Um, and until you can feel safe, and this goes back to, that the so our previous conversations, meeting our physical needs, feeling safe and secure, um, then can we kind of widen, expand that sight or the insight and maybe move from that space, because again, these are always in interplay and they're always fluctuating and intertwining, contrasting, they advance and they withdraw. And it is how we can, how quickly can we learn how to master some of these, how we organize these energies so that we can respond differently. And then our receipts print out a little differently as we go along our
Yes,
dharmic path.
yes. And as you were describing that, I was thinking of the continuity of lifetimes and how, when I earlier mentioned that in the birth chart you can see some of these qualities, where uh, it's a loose measurement system, and I use the term loose because it is an ambience more than an actual number. You can't say, well, I have two tamasics and three sattvics. It's an ambience, but it's indicated by the planets and their placement in your chart. And this ambience then is surrounding you from the time of your birth, and as you and we, not just you, come into a more mature life over time, those qualities, as you mentioned, weave together and interact, and we learn to utilize a tamasic way of being. I mean, that's all about self care. Restorative yoga, nobody's going to call that rajasic. We are seriously in a state of repose and
Mhm.
relaxing and really recharging and recouping. And so understanding them rather than having them rule us, right?
That's what it's about.
Yes, we gain enough knowledge about our way of being in the world that we can start utilizing the best of those three in ways that give us a dharmic way that's growth oriented and ultimately sattvic.
Mhm. Exactly. Yes. And that tamasic aspect is part of a cycle. When something needs to be removed, it dies, it goes through its decay, and that through that decay we can grow new things. But that's all part of the process and cycles that we go through. And I in my preparation for this week, one thing that really stood out to me is how in the West we don't acknowledge, we only pay attention to the outermost layer of ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and the development of us from wherever we come from to when we portal into this planet and this plane of existence. It's a very subtle, it's a subtle creation process. Creation has layers. And and I think we learn this as we go through life because we see when a baby is born, it doesn't differentiate between itself and and it's merged with everything. And I think we see this through synesthesia, which is a very interesting when,
Yes.
yes. So that
Mhm.
synesthesia isn't, um, it's the, how do I say this? So well, I guess, well, let's start with synesthesia might be it's hearing colors
Mhm.
or experiencing, you might see a number and immediately know its sound.
Mhm.
So it's and folks who experience synesthesia experience multiple sensations or unexpected sensations or relationships between sensory input. And this isn't something that's like a breakdown. It's something that maybe didn't develop because as we're babies, all of that stuff, the mother's voice might be a color or a feeling to a
Mhm.
baby. So as we develop and we put on more of our ego identity and we put on more layers and we just pay attention a lot to the body, to the mind in the West as well. But all those of our subtle layers that developed underneath all of that before we developed our ego identity, that's what we're peeling away the layers and getting back to those subtle aspects and layers of ourself, which of the gunas are just three. Those are just, there's many subtle layers of our coming into being, I
Yes,
guess.
and interesting you should say the three gunas, which are the three that we usually um, look to, right? Because it helps simplify the categories, and there are more. Some
Mhm.
say 20 plus, some say 30 plus, and so depending on uh, how detailed you want to get in the system of organizing concepts, right? Um, then you may get more. But I think what you were talking about is the subtle bodies.
Yes, yeah, which we'll be touching on. I won't dive into that yet.
Yeah.
Just put my toes on the edge of that pool. Um, right. But it's a very we're a lot there's a lot more subtle aspects to us than we're traditionally and conventionally taught in the West. And that's the beauty of practice is discovering those and sensing those through a practice because we've said as this whole conversation we've been saying you want to develop this, you want to develop that, or how do we use these, how do we work with these energies? Spoiler alert, it's practice again,
Right.
whether that's meditation practice or a mindfulness practice, or,
Mhm.
if it's Tai Chi for you, or if it's running, or if it's gardening, whatever is that allows you to come, breath work, pranayam. I like to use a more formal practice, but, um, it is through practice that we achieve the balance or you know, the pleasant harmonics of the combination of these
Mhm. Yeah,
gunas.
I like to think of what you were just saying. Maybe people can relate to this, or maybe they're just going to go, "Oh no, she's diving into mathematics again." But I'm going to for a second. We think about how many times we practiced as a child. What one plus one is, and we have blocks, and we make it happen, and we learn about it from that matter and the relationship of matter, one thing to another. And then ultimately, we begin to gain an understanding of it. It gets more complex. And then we use the technology tools that are available, the calculators, and then the more sophisticated ones. Then we start looking at algorithms, and the list goes on, right?
Mm.
And then you get into quantum physics. So that to me is what you were describing as well, is that the practice is getting the concepts down, understanding a more formal practice gives you a framework so that you can grow the edges and create your own understanding of the nuances and the interrelationships. So, skipping over the 1 plus 1 playing with the blocks thing, we know what that is because that's happened in our education system um, to some extent. And so, if the technology tools aren't there, or we don't have a mental process to be able to logically check back and see, is this even close to correct? When you get into the higher qualities of mathematics, having that foundation in place intellectually is like, to me, having a formal practice. Those are where I can come back to a place, those practices can come back to a place or places that give me something to stand on. And then I can discern, is this over here that's coming in uh, connected? Does it even make sense? And is it something that I should entertain or just, let it go? So I agree with you about the formal practice. You may do it frequently, you may do it infrequently, you may do it for a time frame and give it a break and go out on your own and do things for a while. But coming back to your roots, and that formal practice to me is the root of my being.
It is, and it's one of those, it's important because it's that concept of once that foundation is laid, or once you learn something, you're not, that's rooted in, that's a
Mhm.
foundation. It can expand in many different directions, but it's becomes that place where you don't have to go to work to respond anymore.
Mhm.
When your roots grow very deep and your foundation is strong, you and we're able to expand, we're able to respond off the mat in the ways that we do on.
Yes. Yes.
Or, using that term loosely, whatever your practice may be, it may be a chair, that's fine too.
Right.
Um, but you're able to, like you said, discern, is this for me? Do I need to take this on? Or
Mhm.
is this something that I can let go? How quickly can I drop the things that are not for me
Mhm.
and face and turn into what is for me? I used to work with students a lot who one thing that we would practice and noticing all the things when working on goals, we would do, I would notice a lot of, well, I don't want this and I don't want that. And we have to go, okay, well, what do you want? When we're focused on what we don't want or what is wrong in life, because that's a very, of course, I mean, we want to see, it's important, to recognize where things aren't going the way we want. But if we're constantly facing that, how much energy is just whizzing by us that we're not even seeing? And what if I could let go of this or drop that aspect and turn my attention here? What might I be missing?
Yes, and I find that a lot in um, my role as a spiritual life coach. Is that we talk a lot about gunas. We look at those. We look at the other qualities, the aims, and some other things, so that we can begin to see a different way of how the
Mhm.
life is laid out in front of us. And many of the people that uh, are my spiritual life coaching friends, when they come for the first couple of times, we have some choices. Do you want your chart done? Do we want to talk about that? And some say yes, some say no, some say yeah, eventually. And all of that helps. What you're saying is to help provide a foundation of understanding, of knowing. And I know we're going to get into the self in another episode. So, like the 10 bodies, I'm not going to go any deeper.
Work in any, helping industry and you're helping others. And we are absolutely in as much need of that. We're all I look to my mentors and teachers and guides to be a reflection for me, and also and my students as well. And that's what this walk of life is about, is just being able to reflect back to each other so that we
Yes.
can see each other more clearly.
Mhm.
That's to me what this walk of life is about, and our interactions with each other, and to just help each other reach that more sattvic quality together.
Yeah. And you just described a reason, probably the core reason of our thoughts around bringing conscious eye out for uh, all of us to have a chance. Every time you and I have these meetings, that we have a conscious eye meeting with coffee, I'm having water today as well, uh, different things occur. I mean, new ideas emerge, new connections happen, and I'm so grateful. So if um, any of you have comments or you have questions, please comment
Hmm.
and send us an email.
Yeah. Let
It's
us know what you want to hear or see, or if anything stood out to you. Savitri, I wanted to ask you too, what do you
yes,
have coming up? Because I know you mentioned some of the work that you do, spiritual coaching. I forgot to mention, we just did, let's see, I led meditation on Thursday. We have free meditation coming up
yes.
next week. That's at imbalancelife.com, but you can link there through either of our socials. And do you have any, I know you'll have a lot on your calendar, but anything that you have coming up that you want to mention?
Uh, well, the first thing that popped up, so I'll let the universe be the voice, is coming up. I do a what's called a ancient texts. It's not really a book study, but it is a bit of a book study. And we're going to be studying the lokas and the yugas. Now, what are those? The lokas are the multidimensional um, environments, let's just put it that way, that show up in the Hindu philosophy, and they are very amazing. And I'll leave that at that. And then the yugas are again from the mathematical world, and ages and ages ago. A yuga is an age, and it's a way of tracking the time over thousands and thousands of years. So we're going to take a look at the yugas and the lokas, and how the ages in time and the multi-dimensional environments interact. And
Awesome.
yeah, and you can find that on my website. It's under ancient texts, and just sign up for it. It's just a class, and we'll have probably multiple ones. It'll be like a series, so you a couple times a month on a Tuesday
And
evening. Hmm.
oh, nice. And then if you just want to dip your toes in, Thursdays, every Thursday, 30 minutes free. Sign up now because you got to put some information in on the front end, but then after that, you just click, it's a click away for 30 minutes of just relax and restore with some really great guides. So that's every Thursday.
Yeah, there was one
Um,
other thing I wanted to say too,
oh,
that I'm going to, it's a spoiler alert, so I'll just leave it there. But Ravi and I are going to be doing some workshops in the future. And so stay tuned for that too. And hopefully we'll have some more information about that within a couple weeks about where those might be. So we've done those in the past for so many different topics. And I'm excited to get a few of those back on our calendars.
yeah, we got a few things marinating, so stay tuned. And also, thanks for being here.
That's
And
right.
of course, like, share, and subscribe because we would love to keep doing this and see more of you here. And who knows, maybe, form a little collective, a little community, see
Yes.
what happens. So,
And
um,
I have one statement. I guess it's an answer to a question. I had a question that someone wanted to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and they want to know how much it cost. and they didn't want to push the button right before they knew a little bit more. It is not a fee to you or to us or to anyone. It just means that you will get um, uh, alerted to the upcoming things that come out on the YouTube channel. So, and when our podcasts start to expand into different formats, you'll get alert about that as well. So, no cost. Subscribe.
Nope,
It's just,
right.
yep,
Just so that you know when our episodes drop.
right.
And we will definitely we'll keep you posted and we'll keep them rolling out.
Okay, until next time,
Satnam.
namaste.